Hi everybody, Tim from LogiSense here, and we are going to talk a little bit about mediation. How do we bring in usage or metered records into the system? How do we figure out and take that information from some obscure file format and bring them across and where we can actually rate and charge those different records? So in LogiSense Billing, one of our common scenarios is that we have customers that might be metering, time for voice records, data, API instances, trip bookings, anything that you essentially count and meter, we can rate and charge in the system. But the first step is being able to pull in some kind of feed format and map that over into our mediated table. So here we've got an example of a mediation logic in our system. We're in our extensibility area looking at our actual data profiles. So we've created one for mediation where it's going to be taking in a CSV file, it's going to map it over into our mediated table. Our mediated table is essentially a holding place for all of the records and all of the data that we needed to pull out of that file that we need from a rating and charging perspective. Maybe there's 200 fields in the file that we've got that's coming in from a usage perspective. Maybe we only need a handful of those to be able to rate and charge. So what we see here is that we've got multiple different fields coming in from this mediation. We can see the schema, all of the different fields that are coming in, what are their types, how are these all coming in, if they're a date and time, maybe we need to transform them into a different date time format, how are we managing all of those, kind of a pre-processing step. Then we're going to be using we call our visual map to be able to take these different fields and map them over into fields that we need inside of the mediation table to be able to rate and charge those records. So an example here is a uniqueness identifier. Maybe this is a SIM number, maybe this is a DID, maybe it's a phone number, maybe it's a license key, some kind of identifier or a combination of different identifiers that's being pulled out of that feed to be able to map this back to an account that has this service so that we know that we're building the proper account. Now, if we take a look in here, we're able to run different formulas. Maybe we're doing some logic, saying things equal each other. Maybe we're combining and concatenating fields together. We're able to run multiple different pieces of logic on those pieces of information and map them across then over into the target areas that we need inside of the system. So that can be really simple or that can be complex. It just kind of depends on what your feed looks like and how you need to map it into the system. Now, one of the questions that we get all the time is, well, what if you don't have a formula for being able to do some kind of advanced logic that I need to? So maybe you need to call out and do something in a lookup table. Maybe there's a certain identifier on here that means that something's tax exempt. Maybe there's a scenario where I need to obfuscate a number or mask a number inside of the system. For those scenarios, we also have our callouts. So we can also run different sets of JavaScript code at different points of mediating that file to run logic on that feed and make any kind of determination that we need to over there. So we've got different plugins that we can create to be able to do some complex types of decision making if needed. Now, what we do as part of this mediation process is we're looking for some key pieces of information. At the end of the day, we want to make sure that we can map it to an account that owns this type of usage, and we can map it to some kind of rate that we can rate and charge in the system. If for some reason we're unable to find those pieces of information, we pop it into our exception process. Usually this happens where a system has been activated and the billing system hasn't been properly configured yet to be able to map those records to a billing entity. So in those scenarios, that's going to dump things into essentially our mediation exception area. So if we take a look at that here, we can see that we've got a bunch of different exceptions that happen. We can see that we couldn't match the identifier that we found. We can see the data that came through onto that record, and we're able to find out why these things didn't quite get processed. The key here is making sure that we're not getting any kind of revenue leakage of usage that's of the system that we're not billing forward to our customers. Now, I can run filters in here for searches, for anything that I wanted to filter this record down by account, by identifier, any different ways that I want to slice and dice that data. And then by bulk or by individual, I can check off my reprocess and reprocess that through the system. So usually the process is something goes into the exception scenario. I'm going to make corrections inside of the billing system, make sure that it can be properly billed. I'm going to go back and I'm going to reprocess that usage, again, making sure that there's no revenue leakage inside of the system. So that's a quick look into top level, how we're doing mediation and exception handling inside of LogiSense Billing. Thanks a lot for joining the video, and we look forward to seeing you in other videos in this series.